Shabbos Daf Kuf Beis. Today's email comes to us from Kalman Milberg of Woodmere. And he says he watches the shir every day on Zoom, and if he can't, he watches it on YouTube. He loves the shir so much that because of all the corona and the riots in New York, he says he wants to move to Ramat Bet Shemesh to be closer to the shir. So we wish him a lot of luck. Thank you, Kalman. And now to the Mishnah on Daf Kuf Beis. The Maskanas HaSugya, the Mishnah is talking about a very big chiddush. A guy takes an object and he throws it. When he threw it, he was a shogeg, he didn't realize it's Shabbos. All of a sudden, in mid-air, he realizes that it's Shabbos. Although he doesn't have any control over the object, he's no longer considered a shogeg, and he does not bring a carbon on that action. What if he threw the object and there was no hanacha? Another individual came towards him and caught it. Or he threw it into a dog that wasn't moving, but the dog's mouth is not 4 tfachim. Or is consumed by a fire. There's no hanacha, so he's potter. Rav Ashi takes all these cases and he makes them into one. He says if a person threw an item, he didn't realize it's Shabbos, and on the way, in midair, he realizes that it's Shabbos, and then it landed in a dog's mouth or another person came towards it, then he's potter. But if he forgot again that it's Shabbos, and it landed without a dog, without another person, then he's chayiv in a carbon, because he goes back to a shogeg. As long as you start out b'shogeg and you end b'shogeg, you're chayiv in a carbon. The Gemara tells us we can't say that our mission is talking about a case of lechta umisna. Lechta is a device that holds the saddlebags on the animal. It's a piece of wood, and it's tied to a string, and he tosses the piece of wood but holds onto the string. So I would think, perhaps, if he realizes in mid-air that it's Shabbos, he has the ability to stop the action, and therefore only in that case he's potter from a carbon because it's considered a mazid. That doesn't make sense, because since he's holding onto a string, then the action doesn't even begin. There's no akira. It never left his hand. Gemara says a very interesting case. What happens if a person did a hitzah, 2 amos b'shoigeg, 2 amos b'mezid, and 2 amos b'shoigeg? Can we combine the 2 amos in the beginning and the 2 amos at the end and make it one shoigeg that is chayv carbon? Says the Gemara, if we're talking about that he was carrying something, so he carried 2 amos and then he carried 2 amos b'mezid, then he's potter from a carbon because it's considered a mazid. He finished off his action b'mezid. Even according to the Manda Omer that says, Ein yidiyah lechatzi shir. In other words, if halfway through an action I write 2 letters and after the first letter I realize that it's Shabbos, that realization, that awareness does not break up my action and I am chayiv a carbon. Over here it's different, because as he's finishing off the walking and carrying the item, it's in a situation of a mazid. Whereas when he was writing the 2 letters, as he was finishing off the second letter, he was in a matzav of shogeg. What if he threw the item? It traveled 2 amos b'shogeg, and then he realized that it's Shabbos, 2 amos b'mezid, and then the final 2 amos b'shogeg. Then he would be chayiv in a carbon. Why? Because he couldn't stop it in mid-air. And even according to the Omer that says yesh yidiyah l'chatzi shir, that the awareness in between breaks up the action, that's only when he could stop it. Like when he's writing, he could stop writing the second letter. But over here, that it's in mid-air, he has no power over it. Says Rabbah, if a person has intent that the item should land inside the dog's mouth, then although the dog's mouth is not 4 tfachim, he just created a place for landing, and he's chayiv. The Gemara tells us that if a person who's tameh, and he can't eat kachim, and he eats a piece of kachim, and that piece of kachim is also noisar, and it's on Yom Kippur, he's chayiv 4 karbanos chatas and 1 asham because he ate kachim. Machlokes whether you could add. Reb Meir says, I have a case. You want to ask me a riddle how a person is chayiv a lot of karbanos? He also, it was Shabbos, Yom Kippur Shabbos, and he took it out with his mouth. Say Chachamim, well, that's not part of the riddle. We're talking about an Isra Achila, and now you're adding an Isra Itzah. But nevertheless, everybody agrees that he would be chayiv on Itzah even though it was in his mouth. The issue is, who carries items, if they're not food, with their mouth? The answer is, if a person decides that his mouth is a makam chashuv, then it creates a makam chashuv, and it's as if it's in a place of 4 tfachim. And with that, we finish Perik HaZoyrek, and the many dapim that we learned of Hilchos Yitzah pretty much come to an end. And from here on out, we're going to be discussing the rest of the Lamites Malachas, starting with one of the last Malachas in the Mishnah in Klal Gadol, which is Baina and Makeh B'Patish, the second to last. Building, says the Mishnah, is B'Kol Shehu, meaning, according to Rabbi Yirmiyah, since a poor person will create a hole in his house, and creating holes in the ground outdoors is chayrish, but indoors is baina, he would hide his few pennies that he has in those holes, so that's baina. And in the Mishkan they would hide their needles. Says Abai, in the Mishkan they didn't hide needles on the ground because it would rust. Therefore, says Abai, they would build a small tripod to hold their small stovetop. That's the shear. And in the Beis HaMikdash they would build a small tripod to cook up the few spices that they needed that they didn't have for the dyes. Ravacha argues, he says there's no anios, there was such wealth in the Beis HaMikdash, it doesn't make sense that they didn't make enough of this dye. They would overdo it, not underdo it. Therefore, he says, even wealthy people, they would plug up holes in their mansions, just like in the Mikdash, they would plug up a hole in a piece of wood caused by a worm. The Gemara tells us, when you build a stone wall, there's three parts to the wall. The first row, you take the stones and you wedge them into the ground, into the dirt. Everything else is with cement. And the final top layer, you just put a stone on top of a stone without any cement. And that's the malacha. Mesates means to chisel a stone. That's basically part of building. When you make a hole in a chicken coop, that's not really building, because building is you make a window and a door, but it's similar to making something that you do in a house to get the heat out. So there's a big chiddush in that. Then there's shufta b'kufina damara. That is, you want to wedge a piece of wood into a shovel's handle, so it sticks to the shovel or to the axe or whatever the kli is. That's not similar to baina at all. Nevertheless, Rav says in all three of these things it's baina, and Shmuel says in all three of these things it's makeh b'patish. You would think maybe makeh b'patish is in the last one, in the axe, and everything else Shmuel might admit to Rav that it's baina kamashmalan. Not. Have a wonderful day.